Leaving might seem like the mature thing to do. The house is tense, arguments are constant, and part of you just wants peace. So you pack a bag, stay with a friend, or sign a short-term lease, thinking it'll cool things down. But here's what most men don't realize. That one decision can flip your entire divorce against you. Because in the eyes of the court, moving out doesn't look like peacekeeping. It looks like surrender. And once you're gone, the legal system starts rewriting your story without you in it. You won't see the damage right away. At first, it feels like relief. No more fights, no more slammed doors. But behind the scenes, your position is already starting to erode. Custody assumptions shift. Financial responsibilities double. Your name slowly fades from the picture while hers becomes the default. And by the time you're in front of a judge, the version of events on record won't be the one you remember. It'll be the one she's been living alone to tell. In this video, we're going to break down 7 overlooked ways moving out first can quietly wreck your case. Not with dramatic scenes or courtroom battles, but with subtle, irreversible shifts that most men don't even know they're walking into. These aren't theories. They're real patterns that have ruined custody plans, drained bank accounts, and permanently closed doors that were once wide open. If you're in a contested divorce, or even just considering separation, this is the moment to pay attention. Because once you hand over control of the home, your rights, your kids, and your future might not follow you out the door. When you move out first, the court might see more than just a man trying to keep the peace. They might see a man walking away from his responsibilities. It sounds harsh, but that's how it plays. Leaving the marital home before there's a legal agreement in place can be interpreted as abandonment. And in a contested divorce, perception matters almost as much as fact. Even if you're still paying the mortgage, covering bills, or checking in on the kids, your physical absence sends a message. You left. And in the court's eyes, the spouse who stays becomes the default occupant, the custodial parent, the one maintaining the family's routine. Judges tend to preserve what they see as stability. So when you voluntarily remove yourself, you give her the advantage of being seen as the consistent presence. You may think you're avoiding conflict, but what you're really doing is giving up leverage. Once you're out, it's harder to claim an equal stake in the home. It becomes her space, her territory, and eventually, her asset. You can argue all you want that you left to avoid fighting, but the record shows you didn't stay. And in contested divorces, that fact alone can shape everything else that follows. But giving up your place in the house is just the beginning, because once you're gone, what you've also given up might be even more personal. When you move out, you're not just leaving the house, you're leaving the kids behind. And in the eyes of the court, that decision carries weight. Custody isn't just about parenting ability. It's about who's doing the day-to-day care right now. When you step out, she steps into the role of primary caregiver by default. Not because she's more capable, but because she's the one who stayed. It doesn't matter if you're a great father or if you call every night. Courts are heavily influenced by stability. And if she's the one getting them dressed, packing their lunches, helping with homework, that becomes the new normal. And normal is powerful in family court. Judges don't like to disrupt routines, especially when kids are involved. So even if you move out thinking it's temporary, your absence is already reshaping the custody narrative, often in her favor. The argument becomes painfully simple. He left. I stayed. The kids are doing fine. That story is easy for the court to accept and hard for you to reverse. You'll find yourself fighting uphill to prove you're still essential, still involved, still present. When the reality is, your own decision to move out might have told a different story first. And while that story quietly takes shape, another trap is already closing in. One that turns a temporary arrangement into something far more permanent. Most men think temporary court orders are just that, temporary, a placeholder until the final decisions are made. But here's the part they don't tell you. Those temporary arrangements often become the final reality. And if you've already moved out, that placeholder is built around a life where you're no longer in the home, no longer the primary caregiver, and no longer seen as a central figure in the household. Judges like stability. They look at how things have been working during the separation and assume that if it's working, it shouldn't be changed. So if your kids have been living with your ex full-time while you've been sleeping on a friend's couch or renting a one-bedroom across town, the court sees that as the new routine. You may think you're just giving everyone space, but from the court's perspective, you've already started living a separate life, and they'll likely formalize that setup when issuing final orders. And it's not just about custody. Financial support, visitation, who gets to stay in the house, it's all shaped by what the judge sees happening right now. So every week you spend out of the house reinforces her position. Every day that goes by without you there makes it harder to argue for a return to equal footing. You moved out to keep the peace, but now that decision is being used to set legal boundaries you never agreed to. And while you're dealing with temporary arrangements that quickly harden into permanent ones, another hit is coming. This time straight from your wallet. When you move out first, you don't just leave your home. You double your expenses overnight. Suddenly, you're responsible for two households, hers and yours. And the court? It might still expect you to cover the mortgage, utilities, or rent on the family home, especially if kids are involved. Add to that your own rent, security deposit, and basic living costs, and your income starts disappearing faster than you could track it. It doesn't matter that you're no longer living there. If she's staying in the house with the kids, the court often wants to maintain that stability, and you could be the one footing the bill. Some men are shocked to find out they're legally obligated to continue paying for a home they can't even step foot in, while also scraping together money to survive in a place of their own. And if temporary support, or alimony, is factored in, that's another deduction before your paycheck even hits your account. This financial pressure builds quickly. Savings vanish. Credit cards pile up. You start skipping your own needs just to avoid falling behind. And the worst part? By moving out, you've signaled to the court that you're capable of handling it. You voluntarily took on the added burden, so reversing it later becomes an uphill battle. While you're bleeding money, trying to keep two lives afloat, something else is slipping out of reach, something just as valuable as your income. Because once you're locked out of the house, you're also locked out of what's inside. And that comes with consequences you might not see until it's far too late. Once you've moved out, you lose more than just access to your bed or your favorite chair. You lose access to critical information. Documents, financial records, personal belongings, even your kids' school schedules or medical paperwork. All of it stays behind. And legally, you can't just walk back and grab what you forgot. That house is no longer your space. And without a court order or explicit permission, re-entering can be seen as trespassing. That means if there are receipts you need for court, texts on a shared device, or proof of spending habits, good luck getting to it. If she controls the home, she controls the narrative. She decides what gets shared, what gets lost, and what never sees daylight again. And if you're not there to witness things firsthand, you can't challenge her version of events with much credibility. You're no longer a direct observer. You're just a guy trying to piece together a story from the outside. This matters even more in contested divorces, where small details turn into courtroom leverage. A missing bank statement, a mysteriously wiped hard drive, a calendar you never saw. These aren't just inconveniences, they're weapons in the wrong hands. And once you're out of the loop, proving your side gets exponentially harder. You walked away thinking it was the respectful thing to do. But in doing so, you might have handed over more than just physical space. You gave up the chance to protect yourself from behind-the-scenes moves that can reshape your entire case. And while you're locked out, someone else may be rewriting the story you used to be part of. Once you're out of the house, you're not just absent, you're invisible. That gap in presence creates space for a new version of events. And the longer you're gone, the more believable her story becomes. Maybe she tells friends you stormed out in anger. Maybe she tells the court she felt unsafe or that you abandoned the family. With no one there to counter it, those claims start sounding like facts. And here's the hard part. Perception becomes reality in family court. Judges aren't there when the doors close. They rely on timelines, affidavits, and the emotional weight behind each party's version of the truth. If she says she was scared and you're not around to dispute it in real time, that fear becomes part of the legal narrative. If you left calmly, but now you're being painted as unstable, it's your word against hers. And she's the one still in the house, still with the kids, still appearing to hold things together. It doesn't have to be malicious to be damaging. Sometimes it's just the story that makes the most sense to the court. You left, she stayed, and she's doing her best. That's all it takes to shift sympathy, tilt custody, or justify court orders that would have never happened if you had stayed put and documented everything yourself. And once that narrative hardens, clearing your name becomes a full-time job. You're stuck fighting not just for your rights, but against a version of yourself that never actually existed. And while you're trying to undo that damage, there's one more consequence waiting. One that most men never see coming until it's far too late to reverse. The hardest part about moving out first isn't what happens when you leave, it's what happens when you try to come back. Because by then, everything is shifted. The home is no longer yours. The routine is no longer yours. The court sees your absence as the new normal, and anything that disrupts that, even if it's you trying to reclaim your role, feels like a threat to stability. Judges rarely like to reverse course. If the kids have been living with your ex for months, if she's been handling school, meals, and bedtime, the court isn't going to uproot that without a fight. You'll hear phrases like best interest of the children or status quo, and suddenly your decision to step out, just to de-escalate or get space, is being used as evidence that your presence isn't essential. Not dangerous, not unfit, just unnecessary. Even worse, trying to move back in can be framed as aggressive. She can say she felt threatened. She can file for an emergency protective order. All of it based on your attempt to re-enter a space you helped build. You gave her the house, and now the system backs her claim to keep it. And once those doors close behind you, they don't tend to open again. That's the cost no one talks about. Not just losing the space, but losing your role, your influence, your leverage. The judge doesn't see what it took for you to leave calmly. They only see what your absence allowed to grow in its place. And by the time you realize what's happened, your life has been redefined, and you weren't there to shape it. Walking out might feel like the calm, respectful choice, maybe even the honorable one. But in a contested divorce, where every move is tracked and every decision can be twisted, leaving first is rarely a clean break. It's the first domino. And once it falls, everything else starts shifting out of your control. You lose the home. You lose access. You lose time with your kids. The temporary becomes permanent. The narrative shifts without you, and your role in the story shrinks while the consequences grow louder. And by the time you're in front of a judge, trying to explain why you left, the system has already decided what that move meant. This isn't about blame, it's about awareness. Because most men don't leave thinking they're giving up their rights. They leave thinking they're diffusing tension, protecting the kids, avoiding escalation. But what they're really doing is handing over control, step by step, without even knowing it. If you're in the middle of a divorce, or even thinking about one, don't move out without understanding the full weight of that choice. Talk to a lawyer. Document everything. Protect your position before you give it up. Because once you're out, getting back it might not just be hard. It might not be possible. And if this video made you pause, it should. The decisions you make now will echo long after the paperwork is signed. Make sure they're working for you, not silently working against you.